Hello everybody and welcome to our special meeting of Council for Wednesday the 29th of July 2020. As the meeting chair, I give my consent for this open Council meeting to be streamed live, recorded and published online in accordance with Council's live streaming policy and meeting procedure Local Law 2018. To members of the public joining us in the gallery today, by attending this public meeting of the Council, you are consenting to your image, voice and comments being recorded and published. Anyone who is invited to read out a question or a presentation will be recorded and their voice, image and comments will form part of the live stream and recording. The Chair and or the CEO have the discretion and the authority at any time to direct the termination or interruption of live streaming. Such direction will only be given in exceptional circumstances where deemed relevant. Circumstances may include instances where the content of debate is considered misleading, defamatory or potentially inappropriate to be published. Attendees are advised that they may be subject to legal action if their actions result in inappropriate and or unacceptable behaviour. Thank you. Virtual meeting statement. The COVID-19 Omnibus Bill, I don't think I've ever said that right, 2020 provision allows Council meeting attendances by electronic means. The requirement of the meeting being open to the public is satisfied by the meeting being streamed live to Council's internet. In the event of technical issues with the live stream, the meeting will be adjourned. Councillors are deemed as being in attendance if they can hear proceedings, they can see other members in attendance and can be seen by other members, and they can also be heard. A friendly reminder, please, to everyone to turn off your mobile telephones, and in case of an emergency, please advise the Chair and switch to silent mode. I now ask Councillor Ellis to read our Statement of Acknowledgement.
Thank you, Mayor Tazari. Statement of Acknowledgement. Bass Coast Shire Council acknowledges Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first Australians and recognises that they have a unique relationship with the land and the water. Council further recognises that we are situated on the lands of the traditional owners, the Bunurong Boonwurrung members of the Kulin Nation who have lived here for thousands of years. We offer our respect to the elders, past and present, and through them, all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Thank you, Mayor Tazari.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. So I now ask Councillor Laserve to read the Councillor Statement.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The Councillor Statement. All members of this Council pledge to the Bass Coast Shire community to consider every item listed on this agenda based on individual merit of each item without bias or prejudice, by maintaining an open mind and disregarding councillors' personal interests, so to avoid any conflict of our public duty. Any councillor having a conflict of interest in any item will make a proper prior disclosure to the meeting and will not participate in the debate or the vote on this issue.
Thank you, Councillor Laserve. This special Council meeting is being held to hear submissions on Council's draft budget 2020-2021. The Council has received 31 written submissions and 7 submitters have requested to be heard in person today. Councillors have received copies of all 31 submissions. Our role today is to hear the submissions without debating or discussing the content. Speakers, you will have been allocated 5 minutes. To ensure all speakers are afforded the same allocation of time, we will be timekeeping with a bell ringing at the 4-minute mark and also at the 5-minute mark. And if you continue, I'll mute you. A reminder to only speak to your written submissions without introducing new or additional information. Submitters present today, if you could ensure your microphones remain on mute and your cameras remain off until you are introduced to speak, please. Present and apologies. I have all present and no apologies. Declaration of interest. Councillors, are there any? I have no declarations of interest today. Reports requiring council decision. hearing of submissions relating to the draft budget 2020-2021. To introduce, please, Ms Wasty.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The purpose of the report before you today is to receive submissions on the proposed 2020-2021 budget. Council has received 31 submissions on the proposed budget, and 7 of the submitters have indicated that they would appreciate the opportunity to talk to and present the key points outlined in their respective submissions. Council will, having heard from the submitters and reviewed the submissions, consider any changes that may be required to the proposed 2021 budget ahead of the budget's formal adoption at the August Council meeting. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Ms Wasty. I now request the councillor to move and second the recommendation as it reads. Councillor Fullerton, and seconded Councillor Ellis. Thank you. I now invite the submitters to speak as per the below list. And I just also announce, I'll just let everybody know that since the distribution of the agenda, 3 submitters have advised they no longer request to speak to their submissions. I have someone knocking at the front door right now. Okay, so our first speaker is Danny Luna. Danny, if you could put yourself on camera and off mute.
Okay, am I on?
You are, Danny, well done.
Okay, am I ready to go anytime?
You are ready to go, Danny. Your 5 minutes is starting now, mate.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr Mayor and councillors. As I said in my submission, the garbage charge is levied by council for a very specific service, and that is to provide the 3-bin waste collection service from the curbside waste. Nothing more and nothing less, and that's from council's own declaration from previous years. It's interesting that of the 32,000 odd ratepayers in the Shire, only 26,860 pay the garbage charge. That means that there's over 5,000 or 16% of rateable properties that don't pay the garbage charge, and that's because they don't receive the 3-bin service, and that's how it should be. And you would expect that council, in calculating the garbage charge, would include just the net costs of providing that 3-bin service. But all the costs and revenues of any and all waste management activities, even the ones that have no connection to the service, have been included in this levy. In essence, the garbage charge is being calculated as a regressive de facto rate rather than a charge or a fee for service. Pardon me. In my submission, I've detailed the areas and reasons why these irrelevant net costs should be excluded from the garbage charge and funded from other sources of revenue, including rates. These include waste generated from public bins, transfer stations, the Cows Recycling Centre, green waste amnesty, big chunk of capital expenditure and environmental compliance costs. And I've also raised some serious questions about the way that some costs are applied. I've learned in the last 2 days from council that only 40% of waste going into the landfill is from curbside collection, yet 100% of the costs seem to be going to the charge. 100% of the 880,000 EPA levies, 100% of the $1.3 million in running the Granville Landfill Centre. In my alternate model, I deducted all transfer station expenditure and revenue of 2.2 million. However, I now understand that a lot of that revenue really is from private waste collection disposal businesses, and that revenue should really go back in to reduce the charge. Now, I haven't got the details of that, but I can calculate that for every $270,000 of revenue that needs to go back in, will reduce the garbage charge another $10 per tenement. That's below the figure that I've calculated. As a result, I believe that council is recovering in excess of $3 million from the garbage charge, more than it costs to provide the service. That means that every taxpayer who's levied this charge will be charged $120, at least $120 more per annum than they should be, and that more than it costs. That's because according to the model used by council to calculate the charge, every dollar of net cost of waste management is recovered only from the 26,868 property owners who paid the charge. The other 5,225 ratepayers don't pay anything towards waste management, not even putting rubbish in their bin. So if no waste management costs are funded from revenue, one could form the view that costs are being transferred from one area of the budget, that is rates, which is capped, to another area that's not capped, which is the garbage charge. And further, as I explained in my submission, the garbage charge is regressive in that it impacts significantly on those ratepayers with lower capacity to pay. It's interesting, by way of comparison, the other Gippsland councils, their garbage charge this year, or 2021, are going up from 0% to 4%, a median of 2%, Bass Coast 10.6. Last year was a similar story. Bass Coast garbage charge is going up 20% over 2 years, which is way in excess of anyone else in Gippsland. As I've said there, I think the model needs to be reviewed. I would seek that council supports my arguments and levies a garbage charge of no more than $376, and any review and the model be made publicly available for public scrutiny in the future. So that's it, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Won't be any questions today, Danny. We're purely here to listen to your submission, and we will take it on board. And we have meetings booked in for this afternoon to discuss all the submissions here today. So I appreciate your time, and you finished on time. So well done, Danny. Not your strong point to speak within 5 minutes, but you've done well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, councillors.
Appreciate your time and effort and going into all that, Danny, as well, and being here today. Thanks so much. And now I ask if you could put yourself back on mute and your camera off, and I'll invite Jessica Harrison to put on her camera and her microphone. You're up next. Hi, Jessica.
Hello. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you to the Mayor and councillors for hearing me today. So I represent the Housing Matters Committee today, and we recognise the traditional owners, the Bunurong and the Bunurong of the Kulin Nation. So we are, our Housing Matters group are landholders, experienced social housing developers, ratepayers and advocates for our community's most vulnerable. Our group formed following the Affordable Housing and Homelessness Forum in February, which you may remember. Some of our members wrote to the Mayor and the CEO in May, offering short, mid-term and long-term solutions to the housing crisis. We included in that letter a suite of short-term options which were discussed at the forum, and it was quite a dynamic discussion we had, and pretty well attended as reported in the local media. So we acknowledge that the current budget includes $130,000 towards a sustainable housing study. So we appreciate that. So we're looking, however, for an immediate solution that the council can act on in the current term of office. So our proposal, as you may have already seen, is that the council purchase a property to use as transitional housing. And our petition, which was filled before the COVID crisis hit in February, received 96 signatures, and that's now been submitted to council. So long term, we expect that the council will pursue advocacy efforts to the Victorian government and secure land for development. And we're aware of significant interest to develop solutions with the right incentives and levers in place. And yet we're aware that such solutions will likely take years to develop any kind of tangible benefits to our community already grappling with the housing crisis, as detailed in the council's submission to the state government's homeless inquiry earlier this year, which seems like a long time ago now. The council must act now. So the COVID-19 situation began as a health crisis, but it is fast becoming an economic crisis, especially in Victoria. and we expect that to have long-term effects, of course, on our community, but also on Melbourne, which then, as a knock-on, affects us. So Bass Coast has the right conditions, we think, to establish an additional transitional housing venue as a first step. Now, my initial research, and again, this is as a layperson, other people will be better informed possibly, is that the median sale price for a 3-bedroom house in Wonthaggi, close to the CBD, is $385,000. So drawing on ratepayer funded resources made available during a period in which the COVID-19 virus is an additional stress, council can purchase a property and partner with an experienced support agency which already operates transitional housing in our region. The example I've been using, and it's not restricted to that, is Salvo Care, because they are very experienced. They have already 43 transitional housing setups in Bor, South Gippsland and Bass Coast. And a typical scenario, just to give a little bit of detail, is that a homeless person as a candidate is assessed by the welfare agency, then assigned a social worker, and then they can spend up to 3 months in the transitional housing while permanent housing solutions are found for them. And that they document that a lot of people have, for example, lost their job or experienced a marriage breakdown, and that means that they're in an immediate need for this type of transitional housing. And unfortunately, surveys show that single men are the most in need of housing at the moment. And of course, that is as I said, the employment situation affects them greatly. So Bass Coast, as we know, is built on a cooperative spirit and community leadership that will rally behind this initiative and provide support needed to make it a success. It's a leading initiative which will be first among a journey of solutions that will show Bass Coast Shire Council can deliver meaningful, tangible and life-changing solutions for the community. Ownership and management of the assets that are leased for community benefit is already within the council's experience and remit. The investment will see Bass Coast in good company, as the purchase and ownership of housing for vulnerable community is a feature of most European countries, and more locally similar solutions within the municipalities of Cardinia, Darebin, Melbourne, Geelong and Mount Alexander Shire, to name but a few. In the case of Cardinia, they actually made land a partnership.
1 minute warning, Jessica.
Okay. The investment will see Bass Coast, as I said, in good company. Today's Victorian government announcement, named From Homeless to Home, shows they are ready and willing to take action. They are going to lease 1,100 properties from the private rental market, providing a permanent home for people once they leave existing hotel-based emergency accommodation in Melbourne by at least April 2021. So thanks for listening, and we are ready to work with and support council initiatives, and we represent widespread community concern about the current housing crisis.
Thanks, Jessica. Appreciate all the work you have previously put into this, and also for your submission and coming on today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. If I could ask you to turn your camera and your microphone off, and I ask Phil Wright to turn his camera on and his microphone.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd prefer to leave the camera off because I find I have problems if it takes up too much of the power NBN around here. So basically what my position is...
Phil, before you get going, mate, I'll just clarify with governance that is okay. If I could ask Robin or Leanne.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's fine for the submitter not to be visible on screen, provided we can see and hear all councillors.
Okay, thank you. Righto, Phil, and you have got 5 minutes, and I'm counting.
Okay, thank you very much. Basically, what I'm talking about is a South Coast walking trail. The most common question I got asked as a councillor and since is, why don't we have a path around the island? And basically, very bad decisions made by previous land managers. The first bad decision was in 1870 when Phillip Island was first surveyed, they only allowed a 30-metre coastal reserve. Should have been 200 metres. So private landowners have got right up to 30 metres from the high tide mark. Very bad decision. Second very bad decision was when Smith's Beach and all the other subdivisions were subdivided. There was no concept of public open space. Just let the developer do what he wants. And that's why we've ended up at Smith's Beach with a terrible situation with some beads owning the primary piece of land. And we've been walking through it for years and they've now locked the gates so we can't come. Another terrible decision. Another very bad decision was in 1970 when the then Liberal government wanted to, they introduced an act called the Phillip Island Conservation and Development Act. The council of the day, 4-3 in favour. Then they swung the other way. It was never voted on. Bolte had the numbers in upper and lower house. And because it had a user pay component, the locals said, no, we don't want it. These are three terrible decisions that user pays was going to use to buy significant environmental land. That term has now been introduced into the visitor economy strategy in action item number 57, if anybody wants to write that down. Going to the visitor economy strategy, also actions 25 and 26 are saying we need paths to come to take people around the island. The emphasis of our tourism strategy has been on events. Well, events are very good, but having beautiful paths like you have Port Douglas or Margaret River, Mornington Peninsula, Bells Beach, they're everywhere. Why aren't they on the island? It's absurd that we don't have them, not only for our local economy, protect the environment, because at the prom, when people walk, they learn to look after the environment. At the moment, some of this vegetation on the island is being destroyed as we sit here today. So, the well-being of our residents and our visitors to be able to go and enjoy the magnificent views around. So we're in a very unique situation right at this point in time. The Distinctive Areas Act is fabulous, asking us to have a 50-year vision. Thanks to you, excellent councillors, there's 150 grand, which the next speaker is going to talk about for Smith's Beach Master Plan. And the virus is going to have a very big impact on overseas travel. So you're going to have to say that once it settles down, the amount of people coming to the island will increase. And are we ready for it? Well, what I'm saying is that you've got to, in Byron Bay, it costs you $4 an hour to park anywhere, but if you're a local, you pay $150. We get that money, we give beautiful paths along the south coast, which is just Smith Beach is just the start of it. Sunland Bay, the Esplanade from one end to the other. There's no path into Cape Woolamai, can you believe? The best surfing reserve in the world. Yep, it's the best surfing reserve in the world, and families can't walk in, kids can't walk in, mums can't walk in with their prams. Can you believe that? How unbelievable it is. So there's an opportunity for you guys. Get this money, 1% money, chuck some user pays into it, and then we're starting to move, we're starting to deliver what future generations want. Thank you very much.
Well done, Phil. Well done. You actually got time to spare. Okay. Phil's gone. All right. Next, appreciate your time and effort and enthusiasm as well, Phil. So I had a smile on my face, and it wasn't, it was only, I admire your enthusiasm. I think the way you present is fantastic. So well done. Our next presenter is Phil Dressing, and I believe Phil isn't going to be on camera either. Is that right, Phil?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. A technical difficulty, apparently.
Okay, so I can see your black screen and I see your microphone's on, so go for it, mate.
Well, thanks for that, Mr. Mayor, and thanks again for the opportunity. And perhaps it's not such a bad thing having a black spot where my head should be. I must confess to avoiding my fiscal understanding, but having said that, I read with interest Council's 2021 budget, but couldn't see any reference to funding allocation for further funding for Smith's Beach Master Plan, nor the Beachcomber YCW master plan. I'm aware that previous council had allocated some budget funding for Beachcomber YCW, but I think fair to say that the master plan adopted by council in 2004 has not seen a great deal of activity at all. In fact, I think of some 13 recommendations, very few, if any, have been implemented. The point here is that council allocated $150,000 for a Smiths Beach master plan in last budget, and as we know that the Smiths Beach master plan community engagement has well progressed at this point in time and is progressing well, and we're very, very pleased about that. But I guess the point here is that we're concerned that significant amounts of money have been spent on master plans, including Beachcomber YCW and Smiths Beach, and I would presume others. But disappointing when there's little allocation for funding for implementation of the recommendations arising therefrom. So in my submission, I'd suggested that perhaps that some funding could be allocated for quick wins, low-hanging fruit, to demonstrate to all and sundry within the Shire that council does have an appetite for funding recommendations arising out of plans that have been suggested and implemented, and a fair amount of money spent on them. And we'd suggested perhaps some family safety matters that have concerned us for some time. For example, speed humps at Beachcomber, at the entrance to the Beachcomber major car park, the bottom car park, and perhaps also some one or two speed humps at the entrance to the Smiths Beach car park as well. These are some of the issues that I'm sure will get raised in the Smiths Beach master plan in terms of safety, because it's certainly an issue down there, and it's certainly an issue at Beachcomber. So I hope that council see their way clear to allocating some budget fundings for a couple of those quick win situations in the interest of family safety, and ongoing support for recommendations coming out of those master plans. Mr. Mayor and councillors, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Phil. Appreciate your time. I also appreciate the amount of work that you put into your submission, and the amount of work you put in for Smiths Beach as well. So well done, and thank you for coming today, and thank you for not being on our screen and just sharing your black square instead. That was very kind of you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors.
Okay. So we're racing on through so far. We're going really well. The next person up is Ron Day. Ron, if you could put your camera on and microphone and present to the councillors. G'day, Ron. How are you?
Very well, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the opportunity.
I've lost you off my screen. Have I? Yes, I have.
Try that.
There you are, mate. Got you again. Go for it.
Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Mayor and councillors. My submission centres around the pending regional road speed review. The group I represent was formed as a subcommittee by Island Voice in December 2019 and consists of two highly respected community members, namely Cheryl Overton and Peter Paul, and little old me. Not too much on the old emphasis. The purpose of this said subcommittee was to advocate and campaign to bring on the long time pending regional roads Island road speed review, as we, with many other residents, shared much concern at the 100 km/h speed limits which exist here. This concern was compounded when we were advised that all unsigned rural roads were by law rated at 100 km/h. Did not matter if they were bitumen sealed or gravel unsealed. By default, they are 100 km/h. and there are many such roads here on the island. Now, this may have passed the pub test 40, 30, 20 years ago, but this is 2020. And the island population increase, together with unprecedented visitor and tourist numbers that now use our road, it no longer passes the pub test. We don't profess to be qualified traffic engineers. However, we do have a high degree of appreciation of the danger these roads now present. We have assessed the road network and are of the opinion that a significant number of signs will need replacement, as well as new ones installed in anticipation of the recommendations that come from the review, possibly in the range of 30 to 40 signs. A road engineer from a nearby shire recently had 38 roads reduced from 100 kilometres per hour to 80 kilometres per hour, indicated the approximate cost of the sign replacement is in the order of $250 to $300 and a new pole $350 $400. And this does not include any traffic management costs that may be included. We therefore urge the council to make provision in anticipation of these changes taking place in the budget. If this is not possible, another option is that there was a $30,000 budget. It was $30,000 budget allocation for the virtual fence trial on the Cowsrill Road. That $30,000 was based on the road being covered over 3 kilometres with virtual fencing. The trial has only taken place over 1 kilometre, so there's $20,000 there swinging. If council can't find the money to include provision for
Right.
Okay, I suggest that this approximately $20,000 could be allocated or redirected towards signage for the roads. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's it.
Well done, Ron. Thank you. And I again appreciate all the work that you have done previously on the virtual fencing and your previous submissions, and appreciate the time and effort you've gone to be here again today. So thank you very much.
No worries. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, councillors.
Well, thank you. If I could ask you to mute yourself and turn your camera off, that would be fantastic. And I invite Mrs. Tobin to turn her screen on and her camera on. Mrs. Tobin, I believe I've got Mrs. Tobin and Hartley down, but I believe it's just Mrs. Tobin. So
yep. He's in another room watching from another room. So if you need him, he can come in. Okay.
All good, Tobin. I'm sure you'll handle it just fine.
Okay. Right. Well, it's a joint effort, and because we wrote this nearly a month ago, I just want to say it's a bit out of date. And I know I'm not allowed to say anything new, but I might have to just say that something isn't quite right because it's been updated. Anyway, hello to everybody, and I just want to thank this council because we have been very impressed to date with some of the things that you have been passing in the conservation world, because we've been battling a lot of things for 25 plus, a lot more, but we've been very active in the 90s. And we want to congratulate you on the Yallock Bullock Marine and Coastal Park, which we didn't see coming and we just thought it was wonderful. Mike Cleland and his dinosaur trail, we just think that's just fantastic. And your request to the state government to purchase the Lang Lang GMH Proving Ground site to protect the environmental, coastal and cultural assets, that was just a top decision. And your decision not to allow the Mars Landing Marina proposal in Inverloch to go ahead. I mean, as a conservationist, that's pretty standard. You just wouldn't do something like that. But I appreciate that not everybody has done the sort of conservation studies we've done over our lifetimes. Anyway, and then the Granville Grass Tree Forest, I was very pleased how sympathetic you were about that, but I'm hoping that big things will come. I don't know if you can see this, but that's the forest I'm talking about, and that's the forest that is going to be so-called translocated, and we're very worried about that because the experts on Save Our Holden Bushlands They point out that it's just not the thing you do, but the sand mine fellow has to do it according to the regulations, and he thinks he can do it. This particular shot is in the buffer zone, and now with CERA, this is a little bit of the update. CERA is now saying that they can expand their sand into buffer zones and things. So I'm very, very wary about that ever going ahead. And if the government can change the law, like maybe they can change the law to protect that forest from development, because that's taken millions of years to get to that stage. And if with a dying industry like the sand mining industry, it is dying, we haven't got enough sand to keep us going forever because it takes too long to be created. And already hemp is taking over a lot of that. So if we're going to let the industry die, which it has to, just like timber cutting has to die unless we keep replenishing the forests for them to cut down, well, we need to think hard about what we're going to take in its dying throes. So if we take things like that in the dying throes, I think we're very short-sighted, and I'm hoping that you people also agree, and I gather there's some sympathy there. Okay, so if we're going to protect these things, two things, the Holden Proving Ground site, I know I'm not supposed to be talking about the national park, but I have got a map here. I hope you can see this map. But if you can see, can you see? Hold on, sorry. If you can see that, you've got the proving ground up there, and there's a bit of green all the way down side of Western Port Bay down to the Granville Reserve. Okay, well, I'm talking about the top part and the bottom part mainly in the submission because that's what I wrote about. And we're trying to get the...
Mrs. Tobin, as much as I don't want to hurry up because you were my teacher and I have total respect, you've got 1 minute.
Okay, well, the proving ground recently came up for sale. There is no indication that the government's definitely going to buy it. From what we can gather from our sources, they haven't put in a bid yet. And although they're going to look at purchasing it, they've got to push out the other bidders who have already put in their play. Okay. Now, the other one is the Grass Tree Forest. Both these places are distinctive areas, distinctive landscape. I've lost my place. Distinctive areas and landscapes in the Bass Coast Shire. We were never asked to discuss those when we looked at the envelope to San Remo part, but we think that we should be protecting the last 5% of virgin bush in the whole of West Gippsland. They have cleared 95% of West Gippsland, and the only decent bit of remnant vegetation that's left goes from Lang Lang Proving Ground down to the Granville Nature Reserve. Okay, I can't say any more, but make it a national park, please. Okay, thanks very much.
Mrs. Tobin, that was fantastic. Such a quiet little thing you are, and you've filled your 5 minutes perfectly. So well done. And I appreciate your enthusiasm and Hartley's as well, and also your previous submissions. And thank you for your time to come here today as well.
All right, thank you. Okay, I'll try and get myself off screen.
No worries at all. Well done. And while Mrs. Tobin does that, I'll ask our next and I think final presenter today is Tim Herring. If I could ask Tim to, there he is, put on his screen and his microphone. And Tim, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and councillors. I'm speaking on behalf of the Tenby Point Residents Association, and we've come up with just 3 small items because we believe that if we ask small, we're going to get success easier. The first thing is we're asking council to plant appropriate plants and shrubs in 2 blocks on Tenby Point, numbers 100 and 101, which are owned by the council. They need work. There's been flooding in those areas. There's been encroachment by adjacent neighbours, small, but there. There's been a little parking on those blocks and so on. And frankly, they should be animal-friendly corridors, and we'd like to see something done about it. The second item is a little more major. We're in favour of re-establishing manor gums for a future koala coastal corridor, which connects the mouth of the Bass River with Lang Lang. And I'm not asking for you to do all of that. but it's a much larger project. But I think we can advocate for a small starts, maybe just a few key areas, planting manna gums, possibly around Tenby Point, of course. And this is an important corridor that should be established, which will complement very much what Meryl was just talking about, the corridor that goes down more further inland. Both areas are important for movement of animals and for establishing a healthy environment. The third is a small item, and that is a replacement of the Tenby Point notice board, which is actually situated at the bus stop of Argent Road, adjacent to Guy Road. And the old one is in very bad repair. It's a small issue, but it's not a good look for the Tenby Point hamlet, as we like to call it, because the only other sign we have there is in fact a road sign, just saying Tenby Point. We don't use it at the moment because of the state it's in, and we regularly email all of our residents who are members, and that's actually 38% of the residents here, so we're quite proud of that. And we mail drop the others 3 or 4 times a year. I would like to be able to post more items on that notice board and bring it to people's attention. And just a warning, it has been repaired a couple of times before, so we really need a proper weather-tight solution. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, sorry.
Thank you, Tim. That was very precise, and you've done well. And again, also appreciate your time and effort that you've put into not only being here today, but other previous submissions and efforts as well. So thank you so much for your submission and presentation today. And I ask if you could now put yourself on mute and camera, and that concludes the presentations, I understand. I don't think I've missed anyone. So I thank all of our presenters today for their very enthusiastic, not only submissions and the work that they put into their written submissions, but also the time and effort to be here today and present to us all, of which I'm sure we all enjoyed and all take on board, and we will be discussing at length as we finalise our budget. So to everybody out there, thank you everyone who's taken the time and effort to review the draft budget. Thank you to our 31 submissions that we got written and sent in. I assure you we have all looked over them all, and we take them all into account as we go into some fairly long and exciting debate as we finalise the budget moving forward. So in closing now, I ask if we could have a vote that we accept the submissions and the people that have submitted here today. We had a mover and a seconder. If we could put it to a vote, all in favour that we accept the submissions as we've just heard, please raise your hand. That is Councillor Tassari, Whelan, Lark, Laserve, Ellis, Rothfield, Fullerton, Kent and Brown, and that is carried. So that concludes that part of it. I now just announce that we continue to monitor the COVID-19 pandemic response and restrictions set out by the state and federal governments. Council will continue to pause community connection sessions for the coming months. The next ordinary council meeting will be held virtually on the 19th of August 2020, commencing at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It will be open to the public via live stream. And with that, I thank everybody and I announce this meeting is now closed. If we could all just sit tight for the stream to finish.